Deputy Prime Minister and Housing Minister Angela Rayner made glaring contradictions in her party's housing and immigration policies. Now, it would appear Labour's approach to these rather important issues is not just misguided, it's downright dangerous for Britain's future.
Britain's most useless Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, just can't stop humiliating herself.
So councillors and councils will identify areas for development and then it goes forward.
I'm not talking about intention. I'm talking about your boss's favourite word, delivery. If they say they cannot deliver this or will not deliver it, what are you going to do?
When Angela is not busy spouting the most appalling things, she's exposing how clueless she is.
He is sinking like the Titanic, and Labour are fearful of a monumental kicking in May. Angela Rayner has tried to spin this. She says this is all part of devolution and she's giving power back to the communities. Well, Reform MP Rupert Lowe struck back, stating the bleeding obvious.
Thanks to Angela Rayner's nonsense on Syria, housing and immigration, Starmer is in a huge crisis.
Well, this is why we want to see the UN resolution implemented and a political solution. Syrians deserve to live in peace and safety, and that's what we want to see implemented. So civilians must be protected, and of course, the infrastructure that is so desperately needed as well.
Well, of course, one of the reasons that we are always concerned about this is that the results land up on our shore. There are millions of refugees who've already left Syria, and some of them turn up in Europe, some turn up here. Have you any concerns about that?
Angela Rayner was repeating media-trained Labour nonsense without daring to give the actual answers.
Well, as I said, if Assad has fallen and that regime is over, I welcome that. He wasn't exactly good to the Syrian people. So we want to see a political resolution so that we can get that stability for Syrians and make sure that they have the infrastructure so that they have a political government there that is working in the interest of the Syrian people. That's what we need long-term for the area, and that hopefully working with our allies in the UN will be able to make sure that that happens.
Her supposed noble goals come with a huge catch that you, the common Brit, will have to pay for all the new incoming immigrants.
I want to focus on understanding how you plan to give effect to the Prime Minister's 6 milestones. And by the way, just to save you the trouble of repeating them all, we're going to put them up graphically during the interview, so you don't have to tell me what they all are. Viewers will be seeing them all.
There's mine, 1.5 million new homes. There you go, that's mine.
I'm so happy you want to talk about that.
Angela, in her delusional confidence, dug herself into a hole over non-existent Labour's housing plans and immigration crisis.
That milestone has not been achieved since 1972. Yep. And since that year, there have been 28 predecessors in your job, including 2 Deputy Prime Ministers, Heseltine and Prescott. They all failed. What are you going to do that they didn't?
Well, just to contextualise it even more, Trevor, is that to ramp it up to the rate that I need to meet that target, we haven't seen house building like that since the 1950s.
She is so horrifically out of touch with reality that she thinks she can do what hasn't been achieved in decades.
We just can't carry on like this. You know, we're not getting the development we need, we're not getting the houses we need. We've got 8 times average income for first-time buyers. People are priced out of getting a home, and I'm determined to change it. And Trevor, I've been underestimated quite a lot in my life, and I wouldn't allow the Prime Minister to put that target up there if I didn't think I could meet it. And I'm determined to do it, because having a home is not just about a home, it's about security, it's about a job, it's about raising a family, and far too many people now can't do that.
She doesn't like failing, but Angela Rayner has been nothing but a monumental failure and a total joke.
Look, I get the rhetoric, but in the end, what happens when they say, OK, Angela, we love it, we love the plan, but you know what? We cannot build this number of houses in this place because we won't have it. Well, are you going to tell them you're going to do it?
They've got mandatory housing targets, so they're going to develop a local plan. The system
but what happens if they don't hit the plan?
Exposing that Labour has no real plan, Angela only humiliates herself further and proves how clueless she is.
So councillors and councils will identify areas for development, and then it goes forward.
I'm not talking about intention. I'm talking about your boss's favourite word, delivery. If they say they cannot deliver this or will not deliver it, what are you going to do?
They have to compulsory have the plan.
But what happens if they say, no, I'm not going to do it? What are you going to do?
Well, ultimately, if they don't have a local plan, then we will have to look at delivery. But they will have a local plan.
Starmer and Angela love deflecting and running away, but this time she's been caught and demolished on live TV.
Over this same period. Are you content that more than 5 out of 7 new homes will go to immigrants?
Well, that's not the truth, and that's not the case.
That's what will happen.
Well, that's not the reality, because
where the 2.5 million immigrants that are in Rachel Reeves' budget figures going to turn up? Where are they going to live?
Well, there's plenty of housing in the UK, but the houses, especially social
hang on. You can't, on the one hand, say we've got to build this 1.5 million houses, and then say there's plenty of housing already.
The audacity of Angela Rayner to shamelessly spew nonsensical contradictions with a straight face is baffling. The more you look at the data, the more it proves that Starmer and his cronies are way out of their depth.
And Housing Minister Angela Rayner made glaring contradictions in her party's housing and immigration policies. Now, it would appear Labour's approach to these rather important issues is not just misguided, it's downright dangerous for Britain's future. The housing crisis that isn't, or is it? Well, Rayner began by highlighting a housing crisis only to perform an astonishing U-turn just moments later, claiming suddenly there is plenty of housing already.
Angela Rayner's sheer lack of common sense is concerning. Who allowed someone as delusional as her to be the Deputy Prime Minister of Great Britain? No wonder every single word that comes out of her mouth is either some disgusting profanity or a proof of her stupidity. To contradict herself on live TV in the same sentence just goes to show that Labour has no idea what they're doing in government. The whole situation is made worse by the fact that these two issues, housing and immigration, have developed into a full-blown crisis. Naturally, under someone like Angela, it'll only get worse.
It's as if Labour can't decide whether we're in a housing crisis or swimming in surplus properties. So let's consider the numbers for a moment. OK, so Labour plans to build 1.5 million new homes over the course of this Parliament. Fine. A rather ambitious target that no one in the industry believes they can achieve, but it's good to aim high, I guess. It was then pointed out that we're expecting an influx of 2.5 million immigrants in the same period of time.
Labour and Angela Rayner are proven liars, but the numbers don't lie. The stats are obvious, and there's a huge gap between the number of houses that are being built and the ridiculous influx of immigrants that's arriving to this country every single day. Angela's plans can't keep up, and that's assuming if she can even deliver on her current plan. People far more competent than her have struggled to hit that goal, so what hope does someone as useless as her have?
She made both of these claims in the very same sentence. Have we got plenty of housing, or do we not have enough for those who desperately need it? Now, we spoke to Russell Quirk, property expert on the show, who can't make sense of it either, really.
I'd love to help make sense of what Angela Rayner says. I don't think anybody could do that, Emily, frankly, because she makes no sense, does she? She was like a rabbit caught in the proverbial headlights yesterday with Trevor Phillips.
Even Angela Rayner probably couldn't make sense of the nonsense she throws out. In fact, she has disagreed and denied her own words multiple times in the Parliament, and that's just embarrassing. It was less of an explosive debate and more of a humiliating demolition. The reason Labour can't make up their mind is that they frankly love immigrants. They have not done anything to reduce the numbers, let alone bring it down, and there's a sinister agenda behind it. Starmer and Angela Rayner have broken all the promises they made during the election, and that just proves that they're liars.
And indeed, I'd argue this is where ideology and reality are starting to collide for this government now, on the basis that, yes, they want open door immigration, even though they say they don't. Yes, they say they want to build lots and lots of homes. But actually, when you start to equate the number of homes they say they're going to build, which they won't, by the way, and I'll come back to that in a second, and the fact that the growing population of Britain, thanks almost entirely to net migration, will actually consume all those homes.
Angela and Labour live in a delusional fantasy world where everything works out the way they want. However, the reality is completely different, and their ideological obsession with immigration is proving to be a huge problem for them, especially since, if the immigration continues at the same rate, both Angela and Labour will be booted out of the Parliament by the furious British public. They're promised to build the houses for the needy and homeless people, and instead, they're filling them with illegal immigrants from all around the world.
We see that the whole approach of this Labour government, particularly on housing, crumbles before our very eyes. I mean, how Angela Rayner can say, well, actually, even though we've pledged to build 1.5 million homes over the next 5 years, we don't really need to because there's loads of housing. I can tell you, there is not loads of housing, particularly affordable homes, particularly social housing. Governments over the last 10, 15, 20 years have failed miserably to build not just adequate housing stock, but in particular, housing that is needed.
This was bound to happen from the start, given how incompetent and useless Angela Rayner and Starmer, their plans were expected to crumble and fall apart. Labour's in crisis mode, but no amount of damage control will save them from the shame and humiliation that they've brought upon themselves, especially Angela Rayner, who talks like a big deal, but fails to deliver on all accounts.
What's clear is that Labour has absolutely no idea what they're doing when it comes to immigration policy. It does look like net migration is set to remain sky high, but the public aren't going to accept it. Net migration is currently hovering around 900,000 per year. That's the size of Leeds, net, being added to the population.
The truth of the matter is incredibly simple and very concerning. This lot of tone-deaf idiots have been nothing but an utter failure for this nation, and we're suffering the inevitable consequences. Immigration rates are sky high and it's only getting worse. At the end of the day, the working class Brits have to pay higher taxes to accommodate all the new arrivals, while the farmers are striking and the pensioners are freezing. The system under them is so corrupt that you'll be horrified by the details of a housing plan made specifically for migrants and paid for by your money.
I think this migrant village, let's call it what it is an absolute scandal. The councils, this Cardiff Council, says that this is a village for the homeless. Now, we don't know precisely how much it's cost, but it is many, many, many millions of pounds. And it's been built without normal standard planning permission. They've put this through under some kind of emergency powers during COVID.
Just like Angela Rayner and this Labour government, this housing scheme is rotten to its very core. They're wasting our tax money by building more and more fancy facilities for migrants, while claiming that it's for the homeless people, but the reality is hugely different. The whole thing was created under the radar without properly being announced to the public. This government and their woke cronies have been pulling this shady nonsense right under our noses. Now that the truth is coming out, thanks to Angela's mess up in the debate, there's a furious backlash.
And supposedly they are for homeless people, and under that bracket, Cardiff Council includes migrants, those who have been granted leave to remain. They were once asylum seekers, but now they are refugees. That means they've been allowed to stay in this country. And those people get to live in these brand new units for pretty much nothing.
The plan that was intended for the vulnerable and needy homeless population that's already becoming an epidemic in this nation has been hijacked to shovel more money and resources away at the migrants. Labour has a history of being dishonest and downright manipulative, and it's no different this time. They made migrants eligible for this scheme without being transparent with the British public. We deserve to know where our money is being spent. Even Angela Rayner, who normally can't stay quiet about anything, didn't care to mention a word about the matter.
As you mentioned, first of all, down the road, there is an entire luxury hotel that we, the taxpayer, are paying to be full of migrants. So why can't some of those migrants go in these units, most of which are empty? And why, too, are there lots of luxury cars all around this estate?
This migrant village is kitted out with extremely all sorts of fancy things, but most of them are entirely empty. What on earth is going on, and what sinister plan are Starmer and Angela working on? Millions upon millions of taxpayer pounds being shoveled into this mostly empty scheme. These migrants are living completely free of cost, and on top of that, there's still countless migrants living in luxury hotels. Labour needs to decide if they're going to build pretty houses for them or pay for their lavish lifestyles.
Qualify for free taxpayer-funded accommodation in one of these very nice units, even if you have a full-time job and you can afford a luxury car. How does that stack up, Kev? I don't know if you've got the answers to that, but I have to say my head's spinning on it.
How out in touch with reality does one need to be to come up with this ridiculous nonsense? Fancy cars and a full-time job doesn't count for nothing anymore, according to Labour. Well-off migrants who are already on other welfare benefits are eligible for these housing schemes. All the while, our actual British citizens, who are in dire need of housing, are left homeless. Now that Rachel Reeves is messing the economy up, the situation is only bound to get worse under this idiotic lot. Of course, you're not allowed to ask any questions, and if you do, they'll start crying about it like toddlers.
Many tens of millions of pounds of taxpayers' money. So I wanted to know all sorts of things. Who's living there? Why? What about the asylum seeker hotel down the road? What's going on here? Why is it that when we went out there, we actually saw homeless people who were not in these units? If these units are for local homeless people, then why are there still people rough sleeping in the area?
People are demanding honesty. They want to know how this government is spending their money, especially since we're being clobbered with more and more taxes. But when people do call for accountability and transparency, something Starmer loves to talk about, they lie and try to run away from the topic. This is typical Labour behaviour and everyone is sick of it. The housing scheme was meant for the homeless, yet there's still many homeless people sleeping on the streets in the area, while the houses are either empty or given to migrants. This government has a lot of questions to answer and they better do it soon.
And it took quite a lot of effort to get them to reply to any of my questions. They initially tried to fob me off with a bunch of press releases, which were all about, motherhood and apple pie, and aren't we nice, providing, nice facilities for homeless people. Under a bit of pressure, they did provide more detailed answers to my questions, but not without giving me a lecture about the line of my questioning, which apparently might divide communities and so on. And
after endlessly demanding answers, they eventually crumble. These people know that they've nowhere to run to and are being backed in a corner. Even Starmer is being forced to completely rebrand the Labour Party since their approval ratings are in the gutter. What's more is that given the fact of how often Angela Rayner messed up everything for Labour, she might be looking for a new job very soon. For now, Nigel Farage is absolutely demolishing Starmer and Rayner. The two have been forced to use the most desperate and disgusting measures.
Are we living in a Keir Starmer dictatorship? Rumours were swirling that Labour was going to cancel the local elections in England.
Why aren't they all going ahead?
And I would say, even before the white paper has been published,
maybe there's a problem with the line. Why aren't they going ahead, Minister?
Well, at the moment, the assumption is that elections are going ahead. However, it's usually in a process of reorganisation.
Not long ago, there were some really nasty rumours about Starmer being terrified of Nigel Farage and Reform UK. His ministers tried to be wishy-washy about it and sell the utterly nonsensical idea that the local council elections might be delayed because of restructuring. Even Angela Rayner gave her 2 cents about it and got brutally schooled.
And now we appear to have confirmation on this. Some local elections due to take place in May next year might now be delayed until 2027. Labour says that they want to postpone them because they're restructuring the councils. Some might not exist in a couple of years' time. But this excuse doesn't really wash. So these local elections were seen as a referendum on Keir Starmer's government. He's currently the most unpopular Prime Minister of modern times.
It's been confirmed. Starmer and Angela Rayner have ruined Labour's credibility and they're resorting to underhanded tactics. They know that the only way to stop Nigel Farage from wiping the floor with Labour in the council elections is to just not have the elections at all. Reform is already polling ahead of Labour and it just goes to show that the British public is fed up with this lot. No wonder, Starmer is the most unpopular Prime Minister and for good reason. He came into government with a landslide and now he's going to be thrown out very soon. Even Labour is internally plotting to get rid of him and Angela Rayner.
And this graph actually shows just how quickly his popularity has nosedived. He is sinking like the Titanic and Labour are fearful of a monumental kicking in May. Angela Rayner has tried to spin this. She says this is all part of devolution and she's giving power back to the communities. Well, Reform MP Rupert Lowe struck back, stating the bleeding obvious. You don't give power back to communities by cancelling elections, Angela.
Labour knows that they've lost and there's no escaping that. Angela Rayner's pathetic attempt at excusing this shameless behaviour is just the cherry on top. What power does she think she's giving back to communities by taking away their right to vote for whoever they want? She gave a whole speech about restructuring and reorganising England, but nobody is buying her nonsense. Everyone knows that they're scared of losing and that this government is on borrowed time. The best part is that they've brought it all upon themselves. Meanwhile, Starmer has sent out his ministers to try and damage control. Of course, they're failing miserably.
Over the weekend, Labour's very own Baroness Harriet Harman was all over the media, saying that Nigel Farage and Reform were a threat to democracy.
Well, I think people should be very concerned about Reform because they're not just a threat to individual parties, but I actually think they're a threat to democracy because they are offering easy answers.
And now they are set to, apparently, cancel local elections.
Just how hypocritical can this government get? They accuse Farage and Reform to be a threat to democracy when they're the ones trying to cancel the council elections for a year or two. Their own actions don't line up with their words, and it's laughable at best. Remember when Angela Rayner was throwing around disgusting remarks at Tory ministers and calling them hypocrites? Well, will she say the same to Starmer now?
Labour are tanking. Starmer's handling of the summer disorder, his freezing of pensioners, crippling of farmers, relentless desire to give your money, taxpayers' money, away abroad, which included another 50 million quid to Syria yesterday, the Lord Ali Sleaze and Donagate fiasco, Ed Miliband's big green revolution, and frankly, his total lack of personality mean that he's currently in the toilet.
The truth of the matter is as simple as that. Labour is trying to turn around a losing battle, and so far, they've only made the situation worse. On one hand, Angela Rayner is making a fool out of herself in debates. On the other hand, Starmer is busy betraying every single promise he made to the nation. The farmers want him gone, the pensioners are freezing to death because of him, and the working class absolutely despises him. There's no way Labour is winning another election for another decade.
The Prime Minister has a track record of not liking it when the public, or the great unwashed, as he may refer to them, vote the wrong way. Cancelling the local elections could be his attempt to make sure they don't even get a chance to vote at all. Is he behaving like a proper Prime Minister or a tin pot dictator?
Starmer and Angela Rayner are actively trying to drown out our voices. They only cared about voting and integrity when it was time to ask the public for those votes. Now that they've gotten the majority, they think that they can get away with whatever they want. Starmer is behaving like a disgusting dictator, and Angela Rayner is throwing temper tantrums like a child. Neither of these incompetent people are fit to lead this nation, and we must demand accountability. Angela Rayner has publicly proven that she's a fool, and so she must take responsibility for her blunders. You can make that happen by liking this video and subscribing to the channel.